Hello, welcome. I'm Commissar Marek, and today we are going to take a look at a mechanic in CS3, namely CS3 Augustus, which is going to be aging and how to deal with population management in the game. The problem with why is this even a topic is that CS3, even with Augustus mod, inherently has a problem where the game depicts more of a modern society which is in a decline constantly. So your people arrive in the city in form of immigrants that settle, and out of these people, I'll run a test, 100 people that are in the city, how many of them are going to be working people, because children up until the age of 20, I think, and old people retire after 50 or 60, these people don't work. And so only a certain amount of people that come to your city will actually be working. And each immigrant will actually carry this population with him. The same goes if you delete a house or they devolve, it's gonna spawn a walker, which is gonna be a homeless guy, and that guy also carries that population that's been ejected from the house with him until he leaves the map, at which point that information is then lost. Okay? And so why is this a problem? As I mentioned, CS3 portrays the in-game society such as a modern society where you don't really have many kids, and the kids that do get born and grow up in the city not nearly offset how many people are retiring constantly. And so I'll show you the demographics and how they look like. You can find that in your population advisor, and you can click on a tab that's going to open up into this graph. And yeah, as I mentioned, so you will most likely never run into a situation where you can sustain the city normally, but that being said, some very well-functioning cities will be able to stabilize over the course. If you run the city for, let's say, 100 years plus in-game, you will be able to get results where the population is gonna initially fall, and then it's gonna stabilize at a certain point where the population graph is gonna just equalize. And as long as you don't add a new housing, nothing like that, you just have to accept that from your worker pool, population pool, only a certain amount of people in terms of percentage will work at any point in time. Why is this a problem? Again, if you play a map and you play it for a long time, it means that your city will eventually collapse due to lack of workers. If you just play a normal custom map, this can be dealt with in several ways, and I'll explain all the ways here in this video, at least that's the idea. So let's talk about the simplest way in Augustus. You can go to your settings and tweak on this setting, which is fixed percent of labor pool. I think it's, I'm gonna show you exactly which one it is. And this will make it so that out of your city population, a certain percentage of people will always work, but the other people will never work. And so this is effectively disabling the aging mechanic and instead giving you sort of an inefficiency where your city kind of settles. As I mentioned, in that period of 100 years, you would see the city settle at a certain population level, and those workers you would keep, and it would not decline further. And this effectively does the same thing, where you don't have to care about aging. Unfortunately, it is also kind of cheesy, and it removes substantial part of the game, in my opinion. So I would actually not advise using this unless you want to like quickly fix something that's going wrong and you need to do that. Or if you like to play maps for hundreds of years, which some people, very few people, but some people like that. So for them, this setting is a solution if they don't want to deal with population. So why is this a problem normally? Well, I'm gonna try to represent a time scale, which is how long are you expected to play a map? Usually it's 50 years or less. Especially with custom maps, some of them only have 20 years, or even, sometimes even less, but that's extreme. Usually it's 20, 30 years, and you're supposed to win within that time frame. And invasions and requests, and after that point, even though in Augustus we can set up infinite invasions and requests now, it still is an issue where, again, your city will keep growing and keep growing, keep adding population, but it creates this demographic cliff where a lot of people of working age live in the city and they will eventually retire, and it's building up to such a number that the kids will never be able to offset that. And usually it's not a problem because you win before this becomes an issue ever, especially if you're on 60 years retirement age setting in Augustus. That delays the retirement by 10 years, and that's crucial. Also, just a quick notion of, I mentioned how it portrays modern society, right? Why is it different than like what people had in ancient times? Well, for people who care, this is purely historical, but ancient societies had many children. Even middle class families had many children. Why is that? Well, it's kind of a strange thing, but in ancient societies, child labor was very prevalent. Because if you look at history, it even was the case even like during Victorian era, even a little bit further, and in ancient societies even more so. And so each household would view their children as a source of income, and therefore you would often see the households, especially in countryside, purposefully having as many kids as possible because they would help with the harvest day. Of course, you need to feed them and clothe them and all that, but at the time, they were net positive for the household. Okay, and so this is how a lot of poor people actually subsisted, by everyone in the family contributing, especially if it was like a family business, that kind of deal. Definitely was the case. And so logically, you should see in a Roman themed game that society should have this constant sort of boom, and as you might imagine, this is actually what facilitated Rome's and other ancient societies' expansion into military and other things like that, because that of course takes a lot of manpower, which the Romans had specifically because they had a lot of urban poor, and these people then enlisted into legions often after Marian reforms, where a republican army became legions, which were older government and were not necessarily citizens of middle class as they usually were in early republic times. They could now receive equipment from the state, be equipped, and instead of being urban poor with no job, they could enlist into legions and have a life there, even though it was quite brutal and hard. A lot of people has taken up that. Why did Romans have such problems with urban poor population and jobs in general? It is to do with their societal structure. Every ancient society that we know of used slavery to an extent, and especially enslaving POWs, captured people during military action and expansion. And these people would then be taken to a lot of plantations, mega plantations or mines, and that logically takes away jobs from your other population, where Romans then used these slaves to facilitate their economy, and their higher classes got rich out of it because they owned such plantations. They even bought up land from farmers and they ejected them from their property to build more the plantations and also eliminate competition. But of course this was terrible for the society, because normal subsistence farming was always the source of not just income but also a solid anchor in society, and it bred people that were Roman. And instead of this, because this is eliminated basically in Italia, Campania and the provinces in the core of Italy, it would cause people to flock to the cities, where they would become urban poor and they would never get a job. They would hang out in the city and they will live there, essentially getting government handouts by grain dole, which was a program of feeding people. It was actually one of the most substantial and expensive feeding programs, but it was just because Romans had to have it due to how their economy worked. It was really busted, and I'm just telling you these things to imagine why would we see a different kind of society if this game was historical, and it's not. But yeah, that's besides the point. So how do we deal with the situation where our city is getting old? For example, let's say we mismanaged the city and now the map is taking longer than expected and we need to win, but our city is getting terribly old and we need to solve it now. There are ways, as I said. Option number one, set the fixed population pool in the settings. Option number two, you can make sure that your city does not have enough health. Health is very closely tied to age. If there's average or poor health, old people will die quicker, meaning that you don't have to have so many people that are vestigial and just don't work. And how do you achieve this? Well, housing levels contribute to health in citizens in that house. So do multiple food types if they are consumed. So do services. baths, barbers, clinics, hospitals, mausoleums within the city up to a certain threshold will also contribute to city health. You can now see health of a city in your advisor, in the health advisor, which is a new addition in Augustus, and then you can accurately judge what your city health is. And some people have sworn by, oh, I make my city only medium insula, and that keeps the health at around average. And that means that people never get so old quickly, but problems with that is prosperity is going to be severely stunted, and it is really only an option like this is severely limiting your city, and you only do it if you play that map for insanely long periods of time. Normally you would not have to do this, but you could keep people purposefully on low evolution, not build mausoleums to not get the health bonus, so that the old people die quicker. That's another option. You can also do that, and on top of it, what you can also do is you can also do festivals to Venus and make sure she has enough temples to keep her happy. And if you micro the festivals each year, constantly give her festivals, it will result in often getting Venus blessings. In Augustus, Venus blessing will reduce age of all people in the city that are between, I think it's 25 up to 97 years. And when that happens, your city gets younger effectively by 3 years. That's substantial. If you can get that blessing consistently, you will not get it every year, but you can effectively keep the city in sort of a perpetual youth with this. Sam has managed to do this in many of his cities, and it does work, but it's very micro-intensive. I don't personally love it, but sometimes in a pinch when your city is getting old, starting to suck up to Venus is really powerful and can delay your collapse, so to speak, for a while, and that can be useful. And especially if you are skilled at it, you can even keep the city perpetually young with this, but it's again very micro-intensive and does not super great. Pantheon holds festivals to all gods per year if you build it, and that will also do the Venus festival, and therefore that will eliminate some of the micro, but you will still want to keep an eye out on that. Another solution is your city is getting old. Well, let's try to expand quickly, make another block while we have the labor, and try to get new people into the city as fast as possible. This will only delay the collapse, and it will still be pretty bad, so just keep in mind that's not ideal. And oftentimes this will still result in the collapse kind of happening, especially since the housing takes time to fill up. What is then left is the last solution, which is cutting the aqueducts, cutting the water. And what happens is you have two options with this. So you know that water is a basic need to evolve a tent from the very basic small tent into large tent. So effectively, you don't want to remove houses from your city, like deleting them, because they will lose all the goods that are in there and all the population as well. They'll turn into that homeless walker, which keeps the population information on them. But removing all the goods is a problem, and then populating this in mergers and everything from scratch is a pain. So rather than deleting houses, you can dewater houses, and that will keep them in where they are as 2x2s, and you will just force the people to eject and then leave. When you do this, there are two options. You can either cut the whole water supply and get the city all devolved at once, which has one advantage, and that is you do it quicker than the other approach. But disadvantage of it is if you already lack workers and you do this, you will collapse, your industry and everything will collapse. So you will have to go into labor industry and disable people working. You go into the trade advisor and disable iron mines, disable the raw stuff first, olives, vines, things like that, clay, and then when the population still is not high enough to support the city, disable workshops for weapons and such. It's good to stockpile money before you do this, because it will take 2 years or something to eject all the people, and until they leave the map. They need to leave the map. If the homeless walkers that are carrying the bag on the ground will not leave the map, then they will find a new house to resettle, and they will do that, and they will carry over that old population with them. So you want to make sure that they left the map before you start evolving again. And so you prioritize prefects and engineers and health usually, so that water services. and then you just kind of let it happen. And then as you evolve the blocks from scratch again, you start enabling new services such as theaters and such. The other solution, which is way less risky but more time consuming, is you devolve one block at a time. If you still have some workers left, this is usually the best solution. Just disable one industry, usually something raw, as I said, iron mines, clay pits, something like that, and then cut an aqueduct access to one of the blocks that you have. And let people move out. When they moved out, you evolve them back again. Then you proceed to the other block and you keep going until it's done. This will be slower, and it's a disadvantage, but it's more controlled and safer. Something to say, this population graph, as I shown before, this population does not necessarily carry over, like each house has population in it, but these people, the game doesn't know these people in that house specifically live there for that amount of time or anything. It takes a look at all your housing at once, and then it takes a look at this graph, and it assigns proportionate amount of old people in that house, okay? And so even new immigrants that come into the city, the houses that are new will often get flooded with old people as well. And so this, again, I would say the drastic solution of dewatering everything at once is better, because it makes the city younger faster. If that's your only concern, you have the money, then do this and just prioritize the very basic services, the very basic needs. Even food production can be cut off at the start. You just need to get rid of those old people, and that's what matters. So cut the water. And oh yeah, why we do this, also not remove the houses, is that if you devolve a house, even up to a small tent, it will still keep the goods in it. So when they eventually receive the services and water again, they will just be able to keep those goods going and evolve back again without supplying new fresh stuff. And that can be very important. And so this is how you deal with aging. And there are some more numbers to go into it, but it's not really worth explaining too much in detail. As I said, this only really matters if you mismanage something, and so for most cities this is not really what you need to worry about. But if you end up in a situation where the map is strange and it takes a very long time, or you mismanage something and you need to do this, well, these are the ways to do it. So I hope that explained it. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you next time. Bye.